That's good. Thank you, Neil. Thank you. That's great. I'm happy to have you all here in our presentation of Amerigo Resources, a profitable long-term copper producer in Chile. We are not your traditional mining company. We are a mining company that is essentially transforming an environmental liability, tailings, which is the waste product of mines, into an economic asset by recovering copper concentrates and moly concentrates from these tailings materials. Our forward-looking statements will be in the presentation, and we won't spend any time on them now. So who are we? Who is Amerigo Resources? As I mentioned before, we are not a mine. We are more of a copper factory. We are a hybrid between a processing facility that happens to produce copper as its end product, but we are not your traditional mining organization. We don't have to spend a significant amount of money in exploration in order to keep resources available to produce copper and moly concentrates. We have been doing this for a number of years. We'll go a little bit into our story in the next slides, but we are not a new participant in the industry. We have been around for a while. And we have a strategic partnership with Codelco, which is the world's largest copper producer. This is a significant source of pride and importance for our corporation. We are producing tailings from El Teniente, which is Codelco's biggest operation, the world's largest underground copper mine. And we have access essentially to all of their fresh tailings. That means the tailings from their daily production. And we also have contractual rights to historical tailings that have been deposited in years past and that contain interesting amounts of copper within them. We also have a long-term growth strategy with a focus on shareholder value. We have a proven business model in our MVC operation, as we will be discussing through this presentation. And we think that that model can be replicated in future in other instances similar to El Teniente's. So we're seeing a picture of one of the aspects of our operation. In this picture, we're essentially looking at the old tailings or historical tailings deposit of Cauquenes. Essentially, it's a field of tailings, dry tailings, and we're blasting them with high pressure water in order to create a slurry, which will then be transported by piping and obviously pumped in to our plant at MVC, where we will be running a traditional concentrator process to produce copper and moly. So that's why I was alluding before to the fact that we are a copper factory. Our operation in Chile is called Minera Valle Central, MVC. It was purchased by Amerigo in 2003, when annual copper production was about 26 million pounds of copper. Production has increased dramatically since. We produced 55 million pounds of copper in 2020, and we have a guidance to produce essentially 61 million pounds of copper in 2021. MVC has been producing copper from historical tailings and from fresh tailings since 1992, but it was bought by Amerigo in 2003. That's why I allude to the fact that we are a historical proven operation that has been doing this for a number of years. We produce copper from fresh, as I mentioned before, that is the daily production coming out of El Teniente mine, and from historical tailings. Our current contractual agreement with El Teniente runs to 2037, so we essentially have a significant number of years ahead of us. And we have renewed this agreement in the past. We used to have this agreement terminating in 2021. We extended it to 2037, 7 years ago, and we expect to continue to be able to renew the agreement as it nears its completion term. One important aspect of our operation is that we have locked in at competitive rates our single most significant cost, which is power. We have a long-term power supply agreement coming all from renewable energy sources that is competitively locking in our major costs. We have a step down in tariffs that started in 2020 and that go all the way to 2023, after which we will have a stable cost of power that will give us a competitive advantage to manage this cost to the duration of our current agreement with El Teniente. As I mentioned before, we have a strategic relationship with Codelco. We've had it since the beginning of operations at MVC, and it has worked well for both our operation, for Amerigo, and for Teniente, and that's the reason why it has survived the test of time. Codelco is the world's largest and strongest copper partner one could have. They have 11% of global copper production, 10% of known copper reserves. So it's significantly important to be strategically related to Codelco. As I mentioned, MVC has the contractual rights to El Teniente's tailings, and El Teniente is Codelco's most important operation. Codelco receives from us a royalty based on production and copper price as payment for having essentially given us the contractual rights to these tailings. So they have an economic consideration coming to them from this relationship. But also, Codelco gets to report MVC's production as their own. So we contribute to their production statistics and to their growth profile. By treating tailings, we are essentially reducing environmental footprint. We are providing a mechanism for relocating existing old tailings in old deposits that are now being transported through our operation after copper is being extracted to a new copper tailings deposit of El Teniente. And there are cleaner tailings as a result of our process. So there's an economic aspect of our operation that benefits Codelco. There's a production element and there's an environmental element. And that is why we have this mutually beneficial relationship going on. Our business model is very simple. It has been built on approximately $300 million of investment that Amerigo has made at MVC since 2003. And what do? We maximize production by managing a mix of fresh and historic tailings. We also manage our costs in order to maximize margin. And we have a low sustaining CapEx requirement of about $6 million a year. This is significantly different from what most mining operations face, traditional mining operations face, where they have substantially higher requirements of sustaining CapEx to maintain their production profile. Amerigo is a pure copper play. We are highly levered to copper prices. This table presents the different EBITDA projections that we have for this year, which assume production of just over 60 million pounds of copper annually. So you can see how EBITDA increases substantially as copper prices increase. At a copper price of $3, our EBITDA is $37 million, which is not insignificant. But at a copper price of $4.40, which is close to what we've been having in recent weeks, our EBITDA goes up substantially to $70 million. So we are extremely levered to copper prices. Our operation has been able to sustain operations under low copper price conditions. We maintain our nose out of the water, but we do extremely well at copper prices over $3, as is evidenced by this projection of EBITDA against copper price. We have a growth strategy, and it's also a simple strategy similar to the simplicity of our business model. What we have seen is that the MVC business model addresses a major environmental issue within the mining industry, which is what to do with tailings. Tailings essentially still contain material, they contain metals, they contain, in our case, copper. And we have proven and tested over time that we're able to recover that material in an economic way by building on a business model that benefits both the owner of tailings and us as an operator of the tailings operation. In the near-term growth, there are still other untapped historic tailing deposits at El Teniente that we are working to incorporate into our contractual agreements. Codelco also has 6 other mines, which all have tailings and which could all have similar operations as what we have at MVC. And we also see that on the longer term time frame, there are major copper tailings deposits throughout Chile that could be also subject to a similar modeling of operations as what we have at MVC. Amerigo is a company that has been focused on ESG from day one, before ESG as a concept even existed. We are producing copper, which is a pillar of the emerging green economy. Our operations are driven by minimizing environmental impact. So we are a true participant of the circular economy, and we reduce tailing footprints and environmental risk as a result of working with tailings to produce metals. Copper is a significant part of our story, as I mentioned before, and we are seeing a bullish cycle ahead of us. There is a significant worldwide push for green metals, copper being at the top of the list, because they are critical to building a greener global economy, a decarbonized economy. Sustainable energy sources such as solar, wind, geothermal will be supporting a surge in copper demand in the coming years. Green demand in this decade is expected to match and then surpass the demand of copper that the world had from China during the 2000s. So we're not being China-centric anymore in terms of the growth of the copper story. Demand is going to be coming from every aspect, every part of the globe. And the strongest growth in global copper demand in history is expected to occur in this year. This is a graph that shows some of the interesting trends that we're seeing behind why, on a fundamental basis, copper is getting into this very interesting point of its history, where demand will be growing, and we're, on the other hand, we're expecting to have supply challenges, mostly as a result of underinvestment in the sector. We're coming out of a cycle of a very limited investment in new copper exploration, copper discoveries. It takes a long time to permit a project. It takes a long time to construct a mine. So we're not seeing realistically a surge in supply that will match the expected rise in demand. So that speaks very well in terms of prices for copper in the coming years. Amerigo is tightly held, as can be seen by our capitalization table. Essentially, 51% of the shares are held by management and by insiders. This has changed in the last year. We used to have even a tighter held stock, and now that's starting to come into more hands, which is it's good. It's starting to be a better told story, a story that is generating interest in the investment community, and our stock is starting to see that surge in interest, both in copper and in especially in green stories such as the one that we have at Amerigo. So why invest in Amerigo? What is investment proposition that we have? Essentially, we think that copper has entered a new multi-year bullish cycle. We're very bullish on copper, and we feel that this is a great time to be a copper producer. Amerigo is a pure copper play. We're highly levered to the price of copper. We have a low capex business model with predictable EBITDA and cash flow. We're strategically positioned with the world's largest copper producer, which is Codelco, in the world's premier copper producing region. And we are an environmentally sustainable copper producer with significant growth opportunities throughout Chile. We have included in our presentation two appendices that we feel are important to tell the full story of Amerigo. One of them is the royalties to El Teniente, to DET. As I mentioned earlier, this royalty is based on copper prices. We have a sliding scale tied to copper prices. You can see that we have different royalty rates for the fresh tailings and for the Cauquenes tailings. Cauquenes is one of the historical tailings deposits that we have the contractual rights to, and it's the historical tailing deposit that we're currently operating on. So, for example, at each of these each of these streams has different royalty factors at different copper prices that result in a different payout on a dollar per pound of copper produced to Codelco. When we fall out of these ranges, and we haven't fallen out of these ranges before, DET and MVC would meet to reset the royalty factors and maintain a similar equilibrium to what is being set in by the existing factors. The table to the right shows what the DET copper royalties would be in 2021 at various copper prices, considering the mix of fresh and historic tailings that we are having in our mining plan. So, for example, at a copper price of $4.40, we're paying to Codelco a royalty of $1.35. Another aspect, another appendix that we have included in our presentation is the moly byproduct credit. As I mentioned, we produce both copper concentrates as our main commodity, but we also produce molybdenum, and we are factoring that molybdenum to be produced at a rate of 1.5 million pounds this year. When we're talking about our cash cost, which is a non-GAAP measure, we consider moly to be a credit or a reduction to cash cost. At the right moly market price, the contribution of moly can be significant. In fact, years ago, when moly prices were over $30 per pound, we had a negative cash cost as a result of that. The table on the right shows the moly byproduct credit cash cost in 2021 at various moly prices. Essentially, in May, moly prices were slightly over $13 per pound, so that represents a moly byproduct credit of about 26 cents per pound. Management, we have a lean management team. Myself as president and CEO, Dr. Klaus Seidler is our executive chairman, a founder of the company with significant experience in the mining industry. Carmen Amezquita is our chief financial officer. And in Chile, our team is led by Christian Cáceres, our general manager at MVC. Our board of directors is comprised of various professional directors, and two of our significant shareholders, George Ireland and Michael Lusich, are also members of the Amerigo board of directors. So that concludes the presentation, Neil, and we're open to questions.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Aurora. That was a great presentation. Yeah, we do already have a few questions already under the questions tab. A handful. I just said, if you could, do you see the questions, Aurora, under the questions tab?
Yeah, I see them.
So we could just start at the bottom with Jack's question and work our way to the top.
Okay, let me just.
Everybody else is welcome just to type in the questions in the question tab, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so Jack is asking, what impact does Jetty Resource copper extraction technology have on our business model, and do we have any plans for a dividend in the near term? So he put in two questions there. Jack, Jetty Resources has a different technology than what we have. They're essentially working with a deployment of a similar to leaching technology in the rock that doesn't make it to the mines. So they are working with a material that is essentially discarded before it gets to the mine because of its low grade. They have developed a technology that seems to be mostly not yet in a commercial stage, in a commercial operation stage, except I think they have an operation with Pinto Valley, which is a Capstone mine that they're working with. But they have a different type of technology altogether. They're working with different resources than what we are. We are working with tailings as the end result of a mining process. They're working with rock that doesn't make it to the mine. So we're looking at different aspects, but the premise seems to be the same. You have to look for copper wherever copper may be, and we're all looking at getting copper out of places that weren't that interesting before for a number of reasons. One, there is a price incentive right now. Copper price is doing good. It is expected to continue to do quite good. So the incentive is there. And also, traditional mining operations are facing production challenges, lower grades, etc. So you have to look for ways of getting to copper that were not essentially that attractive before, and everybody's looking at those. We do have a plan to reinstate a dividend in the near term. We have spoken about that in our last conference call. One of the precursors to doing that was essentially to get some of the constraints that we have under our existing debt agreement out of the way. We're working to that effect. And we expect that once that is done and is set in place, we'll be able to reinstate a dividend as we used to have in years past.
Okay, the next question is from Daniel Lynn.
Yeah, Daniel is asking, there appears to be a valuation gap between ARG and other copper producers miners. What steps will ARG take to increase its multiple? I think I'll give you a boring answer here, Daniel. I think that essentially we have to focus on delivering our results on a consistent basis. We have been doing that for the last 3-4 quarters. We are essentially coming in at 99% of our production guidance consistently. We are meeting our cash cost guidance. So I think that the fundamentals of getting us in the landscape and on the attention list of investors is to say what you said you were gonna do. Other than that, we are working closely with our investor relations advisors to tell our story better, doing events such as the one we're doing with Neil today. We hadn't been doing that for a number of years. We were focused mostly on completing our expansion at MVC. And then we had a series of operational situations that took our attention, but those are resolved, and we are focusing on delivering on results and telling a better story, because the story is better per se, not because we're just doing a promotional exercise that doesn't have any basis. So the answer is sound operations and better telling of that story.
Okay, and Daniel just had another follow-up question just above that one.
Yeah, Daniel is asking, let me just get back to that. What are my thoughts on China's copper stockpile and its impact on copper prices? That's a good question. China announced this week that they were going to be starting to sell some of their stockpile of copper, aluminum, and zinc. They haven't been selling any of their stockpile in copper since 2005, as far as I remember. So this is new. I think it's an attempt from China to curb some of the heat in the market. Whether it's going to have a significant long-term effect, I don't think so. I think that the fundamentals are there. We spoke about them in the presentation. There is a surge in demand. There are supply challenges that are not going to be overcome in the short term. So I think that also the fact that China is not necessarily now the single most significant party driving demand parameters in the market is of significance, right? So I think that we have moved a little bit away from that China-centric copper market. And yes, there was some noise this week. They haven't released any information as to how that those stockpiles will be released, or what percentages. They only mentioned they would be doing it by public bid. But I think it's beyond a short-term noise disruption. It shouldn't have a major effect.
Well, excellent answer. Great. The next one is from Jordan.
Yes, Jordan is asking, the way you contract with Codelco is structured. Are you at risk for any Chile-wide copper royalty review? We have, as you're saying, Jordan, we have a contractual arrangement that is particular to AMVC and Codelco with respect to the royalty that is established between the two parties. It wouldn't be subject to any Chile-wide copper royalty review. Those are essentially just contractual arrangements between Codelco and MVC. I think part of your question may be alluding to changes or potential changes in taxation in Chile, in particular to a mining royalty tax that is currently applicable to most mining operations in Chile. We are not subject to that mining royalty tax, so any changes that would come to that specific mining tax would be of no effect to MVC.
Okay, great. The next one is from Daniel, and I think you touched a little bit earlier on this question.
Yeah, Daniel was wondering, what steps have you taken to ensure your stock receives greater coverage in the investment community? I don't consider myself an investor relations expert. I'm just a manager doing what I need to do to make this company work. But I'm in the hands of good advisors. I'm working with them to tell our story better through different channels. I think we've been doing a good job at it this year. Our stock price is starting to behave more aligned to where it should be in respect to copper prices and in respect to our results. And I think it's a question of time and consistency in the story for us to gain more visibility. But we're on our it's work in progress, but I think we're taking all the steps in the right direction, Daniel.
Excellent. The next one is from Richard.
Yeah, Richard is asking, our cash cost is $157 based on a press release of 2019. Would you provide an all-in forecast until the end of your energy contract in 2037, 2023? Our energy contract goes all the way to 2037. We don't provide guidance beyond our current year. That's not one of our practices. We did provide guidance for cash costs for the rest of 2021 at $1.92.
Okay, great. The next one's from Carmen.
Yeah, Carmen is wondering if management is considering any strategic alternatives given the company remains underappreciated by the market. No, we are not considering any strategic alternatives at the moment. We are focused on organic growth. We're focusing on delivering on our guidance and our projected results. And we are focused on looking at opportunities to grow the model that we have developed at MVC.
Okay, and we have a follow-up question from the same individual.
Yeah, Carmen is asking, would you consider renaming the company to add the word copper into the name? In my view, this would create shareholder value through increased visibility. Yeah, I think that some of the people are a bit confused about our name. We've had some suggestions. Green copper, new copper, tailings copper. Those are all, things to consider. And they could happen, but I think that if they were to happen, it would be nice for them to happen under some other important announcements that the company may have, such as a reinstatement of a dividend, for example.
Okay, and we have Richard with the last question on the board right now.
Yeah, Richard is asking, are you mining at tailings impound, or is this material not segregated from the environment? Could you explain how you manage the groundwater implications of increased water flow on the tailings? We are working on we have two sources of tailings, Richard. One of them is the fresh tailings that we get from El Teniente. Those come in the form essentially of a wet slurry. They are transported via gravity from El Teniente mine to the MVC facility. They go through our concentrator plant, and then they are sent back downstream through that same concrete channel by gravity to the El Teniente tailings deposit, which is called Karen. So those are essentially wet tailings that we're working with. On the historic tailings, we are working with dry tailings, and we actually have to hydrate them with high pressure water in order to create a slurry that makes them manageable and transportable to our plant. We don't have a lot of water infiltration considerations at the historical tailings deposits, and we haven't seen those since we started working with them in 2014.
Okay, we have another one on the board from Matthews.
Yeah, Matthew is asking, he would like to know what the cut-off grade of tailings is to keep the operation technically and economically viable. That's a good question, because essentially we do work with, by definition, tailings are going to be lower grade materials than traditional mining deposits. For Q1, which is our latest quarter, the copper grade that we were getting in the fresh tailings was 0.143% copper. So, that's lower than what normally you would see in most mining operations. And for the historic tailings, our grade is 0.24% copper. So they are low grade, but we've made it our business to essentially work with low grade material and be able to still produce a commercially sellable concentrate at a margin that is economically viable for the company.
Okay, we have another one from Jordan.
Jordan is asking, what are the terms of prepayment on the bank loan, and what do you view as the optimal long-term debt levels for the company? Essentially, we can make prepayments on our bank loan without any onerous condition other than the breakage fee on an interest rate swap. If we wanted to maintain our existing loan and we wanted to distribute cash, we would be subject to a cash sweep of 50%. And I don't think that having a certain amount of debt in the company is essentially detrimental to shareholder value. I think that having debt on the range of $35 million to start with, and going down from that level with a working capital facility would serve well NBC, and that is something that we're looking to put in place relatively quickly.
Beautiful. That's it for the questions. It looks like great list of questions, everyone. And it will give it another 10 seconds if anybody's typing out right now. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. It was a fantastic presentation. And how about we wrap up with the final question today from Sean Tufford, we'll leave it with that.
Yeah, Sean is asking what analysts cover the company. We don't have analyst coverage at the moment, and that's one of the things that we have on our working tasks to resolve in the short term, Sean. But at the moment, we don't have analyst coverage for Amerigo. Great.
We look forward to getting an update from you in a few months, Aurora. Wonderful. For everybody that joined us late, the recording will be available in replay shortly. And well, we might as well just grab one more question, Aurora. There's one more from Matthews.
Yeah, Matthews is asking who is responsible for environmental rehabilitation given Amerigo explores tailings from prior mining. We don't own the tailings that we work with, Matthews. We essentially have the contractual rights to explore El Teniente's tailings, to process El Teniente's tailings, but we don't hold ownership of those tailings. So essentially the environmental responsibility of all the tailings that we're working with is Codelco's El Tenientes.
Okay, great. Well, that's fantastic. Great answers to awesome questions. And yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And have a wonderful day and wonderful weekend.
Absolutely. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you. Thank you.